to do today is solve equations that involve fractions, rational equations. Now, the first thing I want to do is remind you of one way to solve that you already know. It's one that works great for certain equations, and we'll kind of talk about when it works great and when it doesn't work so great. But that's cross multiplication. I'm not teaching cross multiplication today. I'm more reminding you about cross multiplication today. Because on any of the problems tonight, if cross multiplication is easier, you can use it. So you're going to have two options today for how you solve equations. How about remind me how to do cross multiply?
X.
Okay, so x times x, and that's 4 times the 9. And then what would x be? 4. Okay, so we're trying to solve this equation, right? So we want to know what x squared makes 2 equal 36. So what number squared? Now, we use the square root to undo, but the square root doesn't do a very good job. And so we just have to know anytime we take a square root for solving, we have to do the plus or minus. So negative times the negative. Okay. Maybe one of the times I answer it, it'll make sense. Keep asking. Okay, on the next one, we get 5x equals 3 times x plus 2. Not yet. Subtract it, get all the x's on the same side. Subtract the 3x. And check it. 1 over 3 plus 2 is 1/5. 3 over 15 is 1/5. Those are equal. Any questions about that? You did this a million times in geometry, probably.
Yes. Yeah. We don't want to just forget ourselves because we're all against our default.
Okay, so today we're going to be solving rational equations. Equations with fractions in them. There are 3 options. There is cross multiplication. And mainly we're going to use that if we don't have to add 2 fractions together. We don't need common denominators and all of that stuff. There is getting a common denominator, and there is multiplying by the least common denominator. Because I don't want to confuse you with teaching 2 different ways. I'm only going to teach number 2. I'm not going to teach number 3. I want you to know that it's out there. If for some reason you're not getting number 2 method today when I teach it, if you want to come see me sometime, I'll show you the other way and you can use it. I just don't want to show you both because then you might mix the 2. Does that make sense? Like try to do some of both and get really confused. So there are 3 different ways to solve rational equations. You already know how to do cross multiplication, and then I'm going to teach you how to do it by getting common denominators on the whole equation. And so that's what we will work with today. So there's a red sentence. There are 2 red sentences. That probably means you should write it down. Always, when you are solving rational equations, check the denominator for restricted x values. In any method you use. If you get x equals 2, but 2 makes the denominator 0, that's a problem, because that's an undefined value, not a solution. There may be what are called extraneous solutions. We've seen that word before with radical equations. Same thing. You did everything right, but you got a wrong answer, and that's an extraneous solution.
You have to write it down like that. Extraneous solution.
No, you just say, like, mark it out, like we did when we were solving radical equations. We get 3 and 2, and 2 didn't work, and you just mark it out. So you don't actually have to know that word, except if you were to see it on a multiple choice test, so it wouldn't scare you more than. next equation is to get all three of the denominators to be the same. You can see why we did what we did yesterday. It was helping us get ready for this. Is there one of those denominators that I probably need to do something to? X squared put minus 4. What is that? Remember, I need to factor the denominators to see what they're made up of. Okay? Now, on the left, what do I need? Now that I know that the right is x plus 2x minus 2. I need an x minus 2 on the first fraction, and an x plus 2 on the second fraction. What we did yesterday sure helps with what we're doing today. So I get x squared minus 2x minus x, and then what? Minus 2. Why minus 2? Because that negative has to distribute on the top. We talked about that yesterday. Over x plus 2 times x minus 2 equals 8 over x plus 2 times x minus 2. So, step 1, get a common denominator for all fractions. If you have the same denominator on the left and you have the same denominator on the right, and those two things are equal, what would have to be equal? Top, right? If two fractions are equal, like 1/4 and x over 4, what would x have to be? 1, right? You remember doing that a long time ago? That's true, right? If two fractions are equal and we already have the denominators equal, then the numerators have to be equal. So step 2. Ignore the denominator, but mental note restrictions. So I'm going to mental note that x can't be 2 or negative 2. Mental note that. Other than that, I'm going to ignore the denominator and solve that equation. That one looks easier, right? I like that one better. So once I get a common denominator, I'm going to ignore the denominators and solve the easier equation. Get 0 on one side. Why would I do that? Why do I have to get 0 on one side? Good. I have an x squared. Anytime I have a quadratic, I need to get 0 on one side back. Does it factor? If it didn't factor, just quick reminder, what's my other option? The quadratic formula, and you do have a program for that. So I get x equals 5 and negative 2. Oh, I know. You see why I did that? I said, oh, just mental note, x can't be negative 2, and then it red flagged it for you. When you got down to the bottom and negative 2 was an answer, you went, oh, it can't be 2. So x equals negative 5, and let's check. Or, sorry, positive 5. So let's check. We go back to the top. 5 over 7 minus 1 over 3. So do 5/7 minus 1/3 in your calculator. That should equal 8 over 21. So is it 8 over 21? We did a good job.
802 come from my
That's right.
So all that's just rolled.
Mm-hmm.
So negative 2 is extraneous.
Yes. Solve the equation, find the x values, check for extraneous solutions. Plug it back into the top if you want to, or mental
What
notebook.
if you only get negative 2 and like,
Then if negative 2 was the only answer you got and it was an extraneous one, then you would say no solution. That does happen. You're extraneous. Negative 2 is extraneous. So this is the only answer. Extraneous is kind of a fancy way of saying extra. If you went in your calculator and did an intersection on these, you'd get the 5. You wouldn't get the negative 2. It's an extra. Speaking of, I'm teaching you how to do this by hand. Don't forget, if you get stuck on one, to go check it in your calculator. I want you doing it by hand for practice, but if you do come to one tonight that you're unsure of, put one side in Y1, one side in Y2, and see if you can find the intersection. Give you a minute to think about it, see what you can come up with. It needs to have the same denominator. All three denominators to be the same. Find what? Yeah.
Yeah, x plus 2 there. That's 25 because it's
I can't do it in first hour.
I don't know. Get better. I've only done one. In the first one, I was like, step 1, do this. You know, so I don't think
we just stepped on it.
All right. So, what does the very far left-hand fraction need? 5 and an x. Does everyone agree? What is the middle fraction need?
X plus 2.
I know y'all made fun of my cool kid thing, but it helps.
Wait, why would I the
No, because it was
oh, that's
oh wait, no, x plus 2.
I don't know, why do we need the 5 and the x plus 2?
Because the middle
Right, we need the x plus 2 from this one. Remember, x and x plus 2 have nothing in common. They look like they might. Think of, when you see x, think of x minus 0. Right, it's its own thing. Keep that. And what does the 5x need?
so it doesn't need x plus 2 x.
It already has.
Now that's also confused about what x plus 2 is.
So it's only the graph.
Remember, x plus 2 and x. Oh, how many can you count?
So it's only x.
Well, and x is by itself. This one leaves a 5 and an x.
It already has the x from the middle problem.
Which one are you looking at? The first one? No, times x and times 5. Those are separate things. So this one already had an x. I'm not giving it a number. This one already had an x. I'm not giving it a number. It doesn't, so it needs 1. Because these only have 1. Remember, we want them to all be the same. If I get this as an x squared, then it would have 2 and the others would be the same. Hey, you're missing out on me explaining things. Don't make me do this every day. Yep. Yep. So I have 15x minus 5x minus 10. Is everyone okay with where I got that stuff? Times the negative sign distribute. No, I just distributed this negative to both. Yeah, and you probably wouldn't be able to solve it. You need it. Hey, are the denominators the same?
Yes.
What can I do?
Check it at the top.
Forget about it. Sort of.
Don't worry about it.
Mental note. X can't be 0 or negative 2. Other than that, I'm going to completely ignore them. So I get 15 minus 5, which is 10x minus 10 equals x plus 2. Pretty easy equation to solve, right? Either way. Wait. Questions about how I got there? How did I end up here? Just the top. So 15x minus 5x is 10x. So that's the top here. I just, really what I did, Jay Green, is this. I wouldn't want to on this one. Someone tell me why I wouldn't want to cross multiply on this particular problem. This is a great example. That would be really complicated. So we're not throwing out cross multiplication as an option if it's easy. But on this one, it's not easy. So just keep that in mind. If cross multiplication is easy, by all means use it. If it's not easy, don't. So make sense. Okay, add the 10, subtract the x, so 9x equals 12. So x equals 12 over 9, which is 4. Is that one of my restrictions? So it probably works. Now, would it be a bad idea to go in your calculator and check and see if it works? Good. Probably not a bad idea to check, but as long as it's not one of the restrictions, it's probably right. Questions about that one? I think this might be the last slide. Okay, the top one. What is the first thing I need to do? Factor the right to see what it's made up of to make common denominators.
-2 and -4.
Which means?
The left side is 4. Right side means x.
Hold on, let's stall for a moment. I did not hear. Oh, that's fine. That's fine. I saw hers. Okay.
split the bottom factors out.
Because we're going to ignore it in a little bit anyway. So, I get x squared minus 4x plus x minus 2 equals 2. Where did the denominators go? I ignored them, right? Because I can do that now because they're all the same. I'm going to mental note when I do that x can't be 4 or 2. You don't have to write that on your paper, but it probably will help you if you do. Just write that up there so you can glance back and remind yourself what x can't be. Questions so far? Since it's a quadratic, what do I need to do? Combine my terms and get 0 on one side. Again, this one factors. If for some reason you come to one that doesn't, use quad 3 or the quadratic form. Yeah?
Whenever the total number is negative, is it whatever number is higher is the negative?
As long as you don't have a leading coefficient, you can just look at that. If you have a leading coefficient, then you have to think of the bigger.
That's the only thing that confuses me because I never know which negative.
Worst case scenario, put something down and check it. Multiply it in and outer and see if you get that. If you don't, just change it. Oh, good. Matt, what'd you say? Can be 4, why not? But it makes the denominator 0. It was a restriction. So if I were to plug in 4, I'm going to get undefined. I'm not going to get two sides that are equal. I'm going to get the left and right both to be undefined. So let's look at the next one. I'm going to work the next one two different ways. Adrian asked me earlier, why don't I use cross multiplication? And I said, because it's hard. I don't want to. This one is one where it could go either way. So I'm going to show you both cross multiplication and common denominators. I actually prefer cross multiplication on this one, but I'm going to show you both, show that you can use either one. But keep cross multiplication in mind, because sometimes it is easier as long as when you cross multiply you don't get really nasty things. This one, what is this denominator?
1.
So if I do cross multiplication, right, x squared plus x equals 72. And we didn't write it down, but mental note, what's the only thing that x can't be? 0. Neither one of those things are 0. So I get 8 and negative 9. So that's how you would work that one with cross multiplication. Any other problems on the homework that are easy with cross multiplication, feel free. If I had chosen to do this with common denominators, there are. The x can't be 0. On your homework tonight, it says at the top to do it with the least common denominator method. Ignore that. Do it however works for you. You, not the computer. I want you to do it. Okay, common denominator. What does the left-hand fraction need? An x. So I would get x squared plus x over x equals 72 over x. And then I would, what would I do after that step? What's step 2? Don't I end up right back there where it was? Either way. It's the exact same, two different thought processes. Now, let me tell you when cross multiplication is good and when it's not good. Everyone listening, because this could be helpful for you. If the two denominators have nothing in common, you might as well cross multiply. Because that's what you're going to end up doing anyway. Right? You're going to multiply the left by the right-hand fraction and the right by the left-hand fraction. Right? So, if there are no common factors, the 1 and the x have nothing in common, just cross multiply. If the two fractions have common factors on the left and right, or if there's addition, that's when you're going to might as well go ahead and do a common denominator. If once you got this common denominator, you cross multiplied, you would end up with a quartic equation. We don't want that. So that's where you would rather stick with this common denominator. So those are your two options tonight. You have some time left. Work on your homework. Ask me questions. I can look that up. It is possible that there are no solutions.